Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Brittany Pettaway. This is going to be video number 4 out of 6 for my Women and Gender Issues class. This video is going to be in relation to chapter 4 of our book, which is called Global Gender Issues in the New Millennium. The title of chapter 4 is Gender and Global Security. It covers pages roughly 140 to 178, and it basically is a chapter over the discussion of gender and war, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So on page 141, there is another table, as there is in almost every chapter that we discussed, that compares the ideologies of being masculinized versus feminized. So, and they're always like combating dichotomies that we discussed in chapter 1. So the table in this one represents the difference of self versus other, us versus them, aggression versus passive, protector versus protected, soldier versus civilian victim, life taker versus life giver, battlefront versus home front, violence versus non-violence, whereas the first side was masculinized and then the second half was feminized. A lot of these topics obviously come into play when talking about militarization and gender in war, as we're going to be discussing in today's video. So now that we've gone over the typical personas or understandings of how femininity and masculinity are addressed and generally seen in war or in military situations, or even just areas of conflict, period, whether it's in a workspace or in an actual war zone or in daily life, instances of physical and mental conflict. These are the discussions, or this is kind of what this chapter is about. So, as the table said, women are often viewed as passive and needed to be protected and more of a caregiver. Those are the categorization stereotypes labeled to women in military positions and military settings. So women in military are often, or women in general, are often looked at as caregivers, life givers. So for women in military, they have to combat this general ideology that they have placed on themselves, to where they can be masculine and they can be life takers if necessary, and they don't have to always be so careful and they can put on this masculine front of being, macho, aggressive, protector, soldiers. Because as we know, femininity isn't exclusive to females and masculinity isn't exclusive to males. There is, like we discussed in chapter 1, there is that spectrum of gender that you can encompass these different traits. So how men are perceiving these women is that because of their conflicting maternal instinct to war, and women are supposed to be naturally peaceful and peace supporters, men are the opposite of that, then it should be predominantly men in military, and that's not always the case, because women are now, especially feminists, are joining the military because for the same reasons as men, whether it's patriotism or whatever personal reason that they would like to join the military. But it's also being used as seen as a necessity to seek gender equality as a normalcy to women in positions of authority, with strength and just having as much willingness to protect, and possibly even more so because of their, the ideologies that are placed upon them to have their maternal instincts to be protective and caring of their own. So if that's the case, then it should be able to work in both scenarios, correct? Jean Bethke, she notes that war is the means to attain recognition, to pass, in a sense, the definitive test of political manhood. The man becomes that he is seen. The man becomes what he is seen. The man becomes what he, in some sense, is meant to be by being absorbed by the longer stream of life, war, and the state. Femininity involved not only bearing and rearing children and maintaining the home front, but also serving symbolically and literally as the object that required protection. Whereas men served their country in combat as life takers, women served their country as mothers and caregivers, life givers. So this is the common belief. She quoted that in 1992 and 1987. So this is from around the early 1900s, or late 1900s, early 1990s time. So really not that long ago, about 30 years ago. So this is kind of the basis that the women are not as women require protection, and that's not the case because women can protect themselves. Women don't need the protection of men, never have. If anything, women raise men alone by themselves all the time and don't need protection. They are protectors, as stated before. So now that we've gotten to the point of recognizing that women are, growing in the military, etc., women in the military, there is this invisible war. It's basically the recognition of sexual assault in the military and how it has escalated and become a mass issue, and as it was one of the topics that the book discusses, that was seen as, I felt, was very important, one of the most important topics that it discussed in the chapter. So sexual assault and the recognition of rape and prostitution in the military has become so normalized for military men. They even have these things called Cape Towns, where they have literally like sectioned off areas where for men to proceed in prostitution, and previously have tried to have laws and passed to support that men, that is their fundamental rights to have access to sexual relations, and specifically prostitution overseas while in the military. Sexual assault in the military to both women and men has been understood to be almost exclusively perpetrated by heterosexual men. So people who identify as heterosexual males are the primary victimizers of rape and prostitution in the military, and this is an ongoing thing that we've experienced since the Cold War. And before that, Zyla Einstein in 2007 refers to sexual assault or sexual or gender decoys in the case of women of color is race as well, and it's gender decoys. Such decoys camouflage and distract attention from any actual evaluation of the efficacy of militaries and the consequences of militarist values. So what she was basically saying is that women are being used as gender decoys to basically paint a picture for the military to have this idea that they're inclusive or have modernistic views and are so progressive in their ideologies views upon women and all gendered people within the military. And so to have women, it makes it look like it's, you know, inclusive to women, or to have women of color, it looks like it's inclusive to races. But in actuality, only up until evidence up until the mid 1990s, women have only been reported to make up 1/4 of the world's military, and that's just like on average. Most places, like in the US, I think it's about 15%, and then in other nations like at South Africa, it's about 30%. So somewhere between 10 and 30% is the average for women in military, where numbers such around 13, 14, 15, 18 is more normal. So in the end, it comes down to recognizing that women are fully capable of protecting ourselves, or just as capable as men. So there's a quote that says, "We still confront the problem of dealing with the reoccurring linkages, identify masculinity with aggression and war, and femininity with passive and peace, that shore up militarization." Judith Hicks Stein in 1889 argued that achieving gender partially in the U.S. armed forces might ultimately force an acknowledgement that war is not manly and that women can protect themselves. War is not manly. War is war. War shouldn't be seen as a masculinized trait. To protect and defend, these are traits that are often placed with women. So why is militarization so macho and masculinized, and hyper masculinized? So we just further need to acknowledge that women can protect themselves, and that's the point of today's video over chapter 4, gender and global security. So that wraps up today's video, and I hope to see you back for video number 5, when we will be discussing gender and the global political economy.